When you like.
Well, thank you. First off, good evening and thanks for the chance to present our 2021 budget. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I want to make sure that I thank people. Most people want to, but I want to thank our firefighters who, despite everything that 2020 has thrown at us, have continued to serve with honor and professionalism. I would also like to make sure I thank City Administration, Mayor Hamilton, past and current members of City Council for your support. Through your support, we've had a 32% reduction in fires over the past couple of years, had vast improvements to our response times. Obviously, the equipment upgrades have been great, but ultimately it's allowed us to save 9 lives, which is not something small to think about. Which brings me to the main question of why do we exist? The Bloomington Fire Department, we are here to provide excellent public safety. That is what is expected of us. We do that through fire prevention, public education, emergency management mitigation is actually taking the big red trucks out to fix the issues. But we want to make sure we're doing that with some of the best trained people. And we want to make sure we give them the right tools to do their job. For our background, we have 110 full-time equivalents. We operate out of 4 divisions. And I want to point out on our major initiatives, a lot of these are reoccurring initiatives to save lives, protect property, be innovative. But I want to point out one particular one on here this year, workforce diversification. We have had always a goal of wanting to become more diverse. We've been spending a lot of time and energy with community partners, and this is now an official goal because anything that's not written down is more than a dream, correct? So this is now in our plan, one of our major initiatives, and looking forward into 2021, we're going to be using some of these plans that we've built to really look at this problem. We're also going to be focusing our shift away from apparatus replacement, which is completed this year, and we're going to be focusing more onto the station renovations. Again, always looking at employee training and education, and then obviously firefighter safety and health. I'd like to go over a few 2020 updates and very briefly. We did order a replacement apparatus for truck 2 and engine 1. And really quick, just in case you aren't aware, an engine is the large apparatus that carries water to the scene. Trucks are the ones that have the large aerial apparatus ladder on the top. I do want to point out that as we're thinking about being more environmentally friendly, sustainable, and focusing on the challenges that we've already had to deal with, but thinking forward, these 2 apparatus are actually being downsized from their current predecessor. So truck 2 and engine 1 are both dual axles today. They're going to be going down to a single axle, which is also about 20,000 pounds lighter, less wear and tear on the streets. We can make turns easier in some of the areas that are becoming more and more pedestrian friendly, but they also use smaller engines and they are using less fuel to do the job that they were previously doing. Other things, completing an internal NFPA, that's the National Fire Protection Association 1500, that is the firefighter safety and health guideline. So OSHA is the bare minimum requirement. The NFPA 1500 is that next level. We've already completed our OSHA internal and external. We've now completed the internal NFPA 1500. We have also completed a 4-year project to provide 2 sets of gear for every firefighter. And the reason being is when you go on a fire, a lot of carcinogens get in your gear. We can now immediately change out and our firefighters are not having to re-wear those carcinogens. And this will get into another portion of our budget of another thing that we're doing. We are currently increasing interoperability with other fire agencies. Just this year alone, we've enacted the same accountability system, which is how we track each other on a fire scene. And we are currently engaged with dispatch on our 911 protocols. One that we have not made progress on is completing the first step of the Center for Public Safety Excellence accreditation process. Between COVID, having to pivot on some of the challenges that we faced, and also realizing the enormous administrative burden that would be with this process, it's been delayed. We're going to continue to work towards that goal, but it's not an active goal for 2020 right now. For fire prevention, we did order a replacement hybrid vehicle. I'm hoping, hopefully by the end of the year, that I will see council again with an update to our fire ordinances, which are somewhere around a decade behind times. So it's been a big lift and it has to go through a pretty big process, but once it's done, we'll bring it for community engagement and also for council support. Making the one contact with every commercial occupancy, things dealing with the K through 12 schools and our prevention events with IU, as you can imagine, COVID has really changed the outlook of those goals. What I will tell you is that through the occupational assessment that was just published last week, there are recommendations towards the inspection side of how we can do things better. And then also engaging with our partners at INLOC, which is their insurance loss. I've got emergency management, continuity, environmental health, all within IU. They've all been great partners for us to start thinking about how can we do things better with the pandemic. For training and education, I'm going to make this real easy for everyone. Everything on the slide, I have no worries about us finishing by the end of the year. Your firefighters have been actively engaged in seeking out training. We've far exceeded the national minimum standards. And we're also really well established in the internal delivery of certification programs. So this particular goal update, even though it shows them all in progress, it's just because I have to wait till the end of the year to tell you we did it. For investigations, providing the 20 hours continuing education, COVID has caused a few changes in that. A vast majority of their continuing education was completed through conferences and classes. A lot of those are online. A lot of them are having issues, figuring out how they're going to provide that service. But I want to point out this particular picture, and this is a picture of a house that's burned. Our investigators are responsible for looking into that and figuring out how did it start, where did it start, and what can we do to prevent it in the future. So as we get into the future portions of the budget, I want you to remember this picture of how hard that job is and then why we want to provide the education to make sure we can do it well. One goal for this year that's kind of not in progress is the continued development of the Monroe County Fire Investigation Task Force. It is functional, it is feasible. We wanted to see a little bit more on some of the document management and some of the other aspects of it, but that's not a priority goal for us right now with all the other challenges we've been facing. So we'll get into why we're here, which we want to talk about 2021. So a lot of these are reoccurring goals, as I've mentioned. Providing an appropriate response. We've had a 2.5 year, almost 3 year standing goal of being on scene within 4 minutes, 90% of the time. We have never gotten above 84%. And some of it comes down to where the stations are placed, a lot of other factors. Rather than just completely abandon the goal, we're going to adjust it so that we have to get better than we are today, but realize there's also opportunities that'll come around where we can consider, we had an engineering study done that says 3 of the 5 stations need to be replaced. Are they in the optimal location? We'll have to make sure we do all the studies to make sure, and that might allow us to reach those response goals. But our goal in 2021 is to be on scene 90% of the time within 4.5 minutes. We're currently just beyond the 4.5 minute mark for that 90%. That'll require us to really focus and try to make sure we're doing the best job we can. And again, having SMART goals means it also needs to be obtainable, which it has not been up until now. We want to complete an external NFPA 1500 audit. It's one thing for you to look around yourselves and say, how good are we doing or how safe are we? It's completely another to voluntarily invite another organization or entity in to take a look at us and give us a hard look as to how safe are we and could we be better. We want to continue to identify and test innovative service delivery. Our big one for the 2021 year comes in the Mayor's Recover Forward initiative, and I'll describe that later in the budget. Here's another picture I really want to point out. So when we talk about our major renovation projects, this is just a matter of a few weeks ago. This was an unplanned $50,000 expense to rehab some of the sewer connections for our station. That is main headquarters, that is the operational bay. What you can't see is right behind the ladder truck, there's a few porta potties because we actually had sewage cut off from the station while they were doing these repairs. So focusing on our stations after we've finished all the apparatus, it's really important for us to start thinking about basically what the firefighters are living in, their conditions, and how can we be better and how can those designs be better to be more inclusive. At one point, all these stations were designed for a single gender. We need to start thinking that we don't have that anymore and we don't want that anymore. So how can we be more inclusive with our designs? We want to continue the capital replacement plan. We do have a lot of large and expensive equipment beyond fire apparatus. And then we also want to continue our efforts in being more interoperable with the other agencies, both in Monroe County and the state of Indiana. For fire prevention, again, I kind of told you this is this is going to be new for us. We are redefining ourselves. We're looking at how can we be better at what we do. We've built a lot of momentum over the past 3 years, resulting in that major reduction in fires and no loss of life for 3 years from fire. But we have tried a few things. We've had a video contest with MCCSC. I do know that the fire prevention officer, Tom Fagola, pictured here, has worked very well with IU in developing some online content for new students. We are also shifting that it's not all just on campus. There's a lot of students moving off campus. So as we're evaluating where the fires are, how they're occurring, really the demographics of what the causes are, we're targeting education programs to help reduce those. Making one contact with every business every year. There's some really good recommendations in the assessment that was done, and we will be considering those highly as to meeting this goal, which we've never met in the past. We've always said it that we wanted to be everywhere every year, but it's just never been done. So we want to think about our goals, and in 2022 and beyond, you may see a shift in that. For training and education, again, I want to keep this really easy. We're going to continue to meet all national standards. Your firefighters have been committed to that for years. We've always exceeded that benchmark. But I also want to point out that 100% of Bloomington Fire Department employees are going to receive diversity inclusion training in 2021. This is not just the political environment we're in. This has been a multi-year step process. The training that's going to be received in 2020 and 21 is going to take a temperature of our organization. What is the culture? And then it's going to start building relatable practice scenarios, and it's going to help us really focus on how do we get better, how do we be more inclusive, but not just tolerate, but actually become more inclusive of our community. For investigations, this is another great picture. This is one of our brand new pieces of equipment. It's a 360 camera. As fires are going down, we are finding that it is harder and harder to investigate fires due to what's inside the buildings, but it's also going to create a gap in our skills. So by using this technology, not only are we going to be able to better document investigation scenes, but that will be turned into 3D models that you can walk through, and our future crews are going to be able to look at past fires and look at how they developed, and then we can talk about a lot of the investigation techniques. What are our people seeing? How did they determine where the fire was started? But this will also really help us do a better job of capitalizing on the experience from the fires that we do have as we hopefully keep pushing those numbers down. So that is one of our innovative solutions to improve investigations, and we're going to continue to meet all the national standards for our investigators. So getting into individual budget highlights, our Category 1 personnel request is just under $10 million. This is a decrease of about $56,000 or less than 1%, but it does include the 2% salary increase. So I know last night there were a couple budgets where it's not a direct correlation to 2%, and this is another one. As we have senior members of the department retire, new members come on at a much lower rate. So we are looking at our largest recruit class next year based on known vacancies this year plus planned vacancies next year. That also equates to some cost savings. As you also heard several times yesterday, I also want to point out that the negotiations with the collective bargaining agreement are currently still underway. For supplies, our request is $390,000. This looks like a very large increase, 72%. Last year, because we did 2 large apparatus, we really had to make budgets all about priorities. We had to really focus on what was important. Those large apparatus we had to minimize expenses in all of our other categories to be able to afford those. This is returning it, but it's also planning again on some of the things we've talked about, like the largest recruit class ever. When you talk about that, there's gear, there's uniforms, there's all types of things that go into outfitting new firefighters that needs to be included. And let's also not forget COVID. From what we were spending a year ago on cleaning supplies to what we're spending today is drastically increased. So you'll see some of the big points, a little over $30,000 increase that goes in for our cleaning and sanitization supplies, but also the pandemic protective equipment. We were very well prepared when the pandemic hit, but we also want to make sure that we maintain those until we know that this current crisis has passed us. There's $24,000 in there for standardizing of our uniforms and providing safety boots. Our firefighters do receive a clothing allowance, but when we want to make a change to the uniform, such as some of the things we're recommending for 2021, the city needs to provide the first initial issue, and then it's on the employee to maintain it after that. And then we also have several things in there for energy efficiency upgrades. I do also want to mention that some of these upgrades that are in there also go into making our department, our stations a little more conducive for the multiple genders. So things like dividers, other things like that. Just taking a temperature of the environment and how do we better serve all of our firefighters with our limited facilities. Those are all things that are in that category 2. Category 3 is also another increase. I do want to point out that we receive a lot of input from Public Works, both on facilities and fleet. And if you couple those two items together, that's just about half of this total increase. And that comes down to things like I showed you with the picture with a $50,000 unplanned repair. Those types of things are happening a lot in our facilities. They are aged. And again, the engineering study has recommended to replace 3 of them, which we'll get into what we're doing towards that. Other things with new employees also comes the new hire physicals. These are not cheap, but these are required by the state perf. And we've also got to make sure that for every new employee, we have to budget for these new hire physicals. This present year, we realized that we actually need to budget maybe a little more than one because we did have a few people fail. So what you see here is a expense for adding the new personnel. And again, this is just replacing the ones that are retiring or leaving. The biggest expense in here, first off, I need to thank IU Health, who has given us a steal of a deal. If any of you know property and rent in Bloomington, you'll understand. They have been allowing us to use one of their leased warehouse spaces for $1 a square foot per year. That is unheard of, but they need it back for the staging equipment for the new hospital. So what we had to do is go out and search for space. And we have settled on a 6,000 square foot warehouse facility that's a build to suit. Is going to meet a lot of needs for us beyond the quartermaster. We have a central wash facility, which is where we wash all of our fire gear. That prevents all that carcinogen waste material from one coming back to where we live, but also let's imagine after COVID's done and over with, that's where a lot of the community children come and visit. So that hazard is no longer going to be in our stations. It's going to be at the scene, picked up at the scene and taken to this wash facility where it's cleaned and moved and then put back on the rack and ready for redeployment. We also have had a lot of issues with COVID and the lack of office space. I'm sitting in an office that I share with my deputy chief. So this leased building will also provide some much needed office space and storage and really the final need, and you kind of heard this last night with some of the ADA issues around city facilities. A lot of the fire station areas are not public access. They're considered living quarters. But one problem we've had is here at headquarters is our main training room, and it is not ADA compliant. In fact, you have to go to the second floor. There is no help for that. We either do it on that room, or if we have someone that has an issue, we have to move everything down into the bay, which is not conducive for a learning environment. So this new space also includes a training room that is ADA compliant, which will allow us to have these public education sessions in the proper environment that meets the needs of all people that are coming to see us. Category 4, it is around 800,000. You will see it is decreased by $1.3 million or 62%. When you buy 2 apparatus for a grand total of about $1.6 million, and that is not needed this year, that's where the big decrease comes from. So what we are now focusing on is really the other necessary equipment and fire station improvements. The $73,000 for the AEDs or the automatic external defibrillators, that is the device that we carry that if your heart has an issue, that we use it to restart your heart or basically to save your life if you've had a heart attack, and it meets certain criteria. I'm really proud of this mobile breathing air compressor. If you looked at last year's 10-year capital request or our 10-year plan, we had almost $300,000 budgeted for 3 new breathing air compressors. And the thought being is that we need this breathing air at multiple sites. Talking with our logistics officer, our deputy chief, and a lot of our other members, we came up with a better solution. So by buying one mobile breathing air compressor. It meets the needs at all the different sites, and it can be moved. And it also has the capability of bringing the air to a fire scene if it's prolonged. There's $85,000 for fire gear. We planned on that being much less, but I have to plan on the 2 sets for every firefighter. So unless the new ones we hire the exact same size as the ones that are retiring, we need to plan on being able to have those extra sets of gear. There's $300,000 for facility improvements. That is really geared towards Station 1 and 2, which are the ones that were deemed repairable. The other 3 have been deemed for replacement, and we'll only be receiving emergency repairs until we figure out a plan. And working with IU and city administration, how does it fit in the big plan for all of our station needs? The gear washer, we needed additional capacity, but we also realized with COVID, our current gear washers do not sanitize gear from biological. So this new gear washer will add the capacity we need, but it's also rated to sanitize the gear from biological hazards. There's $202,000 for hybrid vehicles. Again, as we replace vehicles, where it's appropriate.
Wrap it.
Yep. Where it's appropriate, we make sure that we go ahead and replace them with hybrids and then IT equipment. So you'll see here, overall, we're a 7% reduction in our budget. I want to talk really briefly about the Recover Forward. The pilot program we're going to be starting is an emerging trend where we're proactively going out and caring for people. So when we have a call where they've overdosed, where they have a repetitive issue, we'll be performing health checks, managing medications, and really providing referral services. And that is for $25,000 for staff and supplies that's needed. So with that, that concludes my budget presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief.